Welcome to Employee Experience Investigations, or EXI. Every episode, I pose a question or a theory and go on a journey to investigate the answer. I'll be asking experts and influencers, as well as customers in interviews. I'll also do a bit of social media stalking along the way. So stay tuned for Employee Experience Investigations. The latest Gallagher State of the Sector report is out, and it says 74% of internal communicators are primarily being measured by employee engagement. Now that's a little bit controversial. Should they be measured by employee engagement as their number one metric? So for my first stop on this topic, I'm going to go straight to the source, here directly from Gallagher. Let's understand the story behind the data. What question was asked? What were the answers? Hi Sean. Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah. So would you mind firstly introducing yourself and your kind of role at Gallagher?
I'm Sean Cleese. I am a strategy partner at Gallagher's Employee Communications Agency. And we have been running State of the Sector now for 16 years. Every year we ask communicators around the world all of the sort of trends and benchmarking insights that we can. Our last survey ran in October and November 2023, and the report just dropped in February. And every year we are hoping to get more and more data because we can do more and more exciting things with that data. And this year we had 2,301 responses.
And about extra last minute.
About one person. It could be you.
It could be you.
About 50% of those come from North America, and about 41% were from the UK and Europe. And although everyone who answers the survey has like internal communications responsibility, people do have different job roles and answer into sort of different reporting lines as well.
You capture all of that as
well.
We
do capture all of that, yeah, right here.
It's for me, it's like the holy grail of like IC measurement. There's no bigger data set on internal communications, and that's why I love digging into the data. I went to the launch event and there was so many interesting insights that came out of it. The big one is the one I want to talk about today, which is that 74% of internal communicators are being measured on engagement. Just to kind of like clarify that a little bit, what was the exact question answered? And can you like tell me about some of the answers and stuff?
Yeah, so I can tell you the exact wording of the question. I'll read it out to you. What success indicators, one or many, are your internal communication function accountable for? Select all that apply. And so we had 1,388 people answer that exact question.
Okay. So, and then so employee engagement came up top, right?
Yes, yeah. So we found that 74% said that they were held to account for employee engagement. The next most popular answer was awareness of the strategy, which came in at about 70%. And then sort of so on and so forth down.
So employee engagement was quite like it was close, but it was like a comfortable lead for employee engagement.
Yes, yeah, and when we look at the different role types, so whether you are in like corporate comms or IC, or if you're reporting into HR or employee experience, actually consistently employee engagement was the top one that people chose. But actually surprisingly slightly more people in internal comms and corporate comms were accountable than in HR, for instance.
Interesting. That's kind of the opposite of what I would have expected.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is why the measurement is useful, because that's the kind of question we're posing today. Like, should the kind of discourse that happened after that result, is it the first time you've asked that question?
First time we've asked that question.
Okay, so the discourse that happened after that was, I know a lot of internal communicators were like, whoa, we shouldn't, this is not right. So I'm kind of intrigued as to like what your view is on that. So do you personally think that internal communicators should be measured based on engagement?
So I've got a few thoughts. The first of those is my knee-jerk reaction was like, this isn't fair, right? There's so many things that go into influencing whether you're engaged at work or not. So we always hear like managers account for such and such percentage of engagement. You've got the tools you use every day. You've got the leaders and how visible they are. All these things build this picture. But to have comms responsible for all of that feels unfair. That said, when we think about people answering the survey question, obviously they were able to select multiple answers. So I hope that means that they are also accountable to other measures. So it's not exclusive. But also I hope that that means that other functions and departments are responsible for engagement as well. But really, I guess, sort of adding colour to that, one of the questions, and I feel like every year has a controversial question. So last year, the controversial question and data set was around the purpose of internal communications. And so when we look at like, what are you here to do? What are you here to achieve? Because I think so many organizations don't stop to think about that.
Yeah.
But we look at number one answer is culture and belonging. So to support culture and belonging. Number two answer was strategic alignment. So if as a function you are responsible for strategic alignment, then it makes sense that your success indicator as a measure would be the awareness of strategy.
Yeah.
So kind of number two, purpose and measures kind of make sense.
Yeah.
So if engagement is what you're there to do, and so many people these days have internal comms and engagement in their job title, right? So if you are also having engagement in your title, it makes sense that you're responsible for engagement.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you're clear on what you are there to do, if the measure follows your purpose, it doesn't really matter as long as everyone's agreed and sort of set it up with intention.
Next up, I went to LinkedIn, my favorite place, and did a bit of a stalk of what some of the discourse was around that data. What are the industry influencers and practitioners saying? And there were two in particular that caught my attention. The first one is from Jenny Field, one of my favorite people, and she says, internal communication and employee engagement are not the same. IC professionals are not HR professionals. It feels like we're going backwards while being made to feel like we're going forwards by talking about AI and tech. Now, Advita also agrees with her. I'm on her emailing list for Comms Rebel, and I found this to be particularly interesting. So, Advita says, our role as internal communicators is to support leaders with employee engagement and experience through effective communication. The accountability should sit with the leadership team or HR, not internal comms. If we own engagement, then we're at risk of undervaluing our role within the organizations. We need to use data points to measure the internal comms impact so we demonstrate our value add and what's working. We should, of course, use engagement as an indicator to form our internal comms strategy and plans, but we cannot be held accountable as we are not and should not be responsible for developing all policies, procedures, and processes in the workplace. So that's two big industry practitioners, experts in internal communication, that seem to be unanimous on the fact that internal comms shouldn't be measured by employee engagement. But if it's so unanimous, I want to understand a little bit more. Why did so many internal communicators answer that they're being measured and responsible for employee engagement? So next, I'm going to ask some customers and some people actively practicing internal communication in organizations to see what they think. Should internal comms be measured by employee engagement? What do you think?
It's a yes and no, because I think employees' engagement is very important, but I don't think this is the only way that we shall be measuring the internal comms either.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I feel like there's a lot of different things that you could complement internal comms with to like enhance the employee experience.
Yeah, I think a similar response. It's a bit of everything, and you just got to sometimes mix it up to get that actual response from your audience.
I also think it's yes and no. I think we need to think about reach as well as engagement. So reach is a measure and potential reach as well, but it's much more nuanced than just engagement, I would say.
Do you think internal comms should be measured by employee engagement?
That's a very good question. I think internal comms is a measure of employee engagement, but there's so much more to it. It's all about leaders at the top of an organisation feeling enabled to want to share information, be transparent to the organisation, and using people within internal comms to help them get that message out. I don't think internal comms is responsible for employee engagement, but can definitely be a measure of many. The big measure with internal comms and employee engagement is the feedback you get. And internal comms is also about listening as well as telling, and at a time and providing information in a format and at a time that your employees want to take that information on. And the more you look like you're talking at their level, in their tone, you're going to get better interactions. You might get more likes, shares, comments on your stories internally. That's another measure, is what's the reaction like? As well as the doing, it's the results.
Yeah, because sometimes people can get caught up in just communicating out, but not actually listening to, is this engaging? Are we getting a positive response? What do people want to see? So I love that you said that.
Yes, and in line with that, years and years ago, internal comms was measured by, we've posted 57 articles this month, we've had 3 press releases, and an event such as the one that we're here for at Unily today is now it's all about, but did they actually hear the message? It's not just communicating out, are they listening? Are they hearing what we want them to hear? And what are they taking away from it? How are they reacting? And is it making them feel good, or is it missing the mark from which we can then learn something else?
Should internal comms be measured by employee engagement? What do you think, Joe?
Good question. What is engagement? I think traditionally internal comms really look at readership and figures and real sort of analytics and stuff like that. But what we really need to be looking at is what the outcomes we're trying to achieve, and therefore can we measure those outcomes, and then that's when you sort of get success, really.
Yes. Now, lots of insights there from lots of practice in internal communications, and not very much a clear answer. Lots of yes and no's, maybes. It kind of sounded a bit like Rishi Sunak at PMQs. Dodge, duck, dip, dive. Yes, that is a dodgeball reference. But it's clear that internal communicators are kind of pandering to the idea that they should be responsible for employee engagement. Now, I've got 2 theories about why internal comms are being measured by employee engagement. One is that it's the fault of companies like Unily. Over time, we were firmly in the IC tech stack as an intranet, and we've been growing our functionality around experience. A lot of people know Unily as an employee experience platform right now. So that's one theory. Now, I want to hear a little bit from the Unily leadership team to see whether they agree. Are we potentially responsible for internal comms being accountable for employee engagement?
Intranets were very, very different back then as to what Unily is today. The intranet was a collection of content, links, static pages brought together to provide employees with information. And that quickly evolved to think about how we can make those solutions more people-centric. So conversations around, I'm Sam, this is my role, I operate in this location, I need information that's more relevant to me. And then we kind of evolved that discussion to more around not only connecting people to content, but to other people and to tools and knowledge that's relevant and can enable people to be more effective. I think where we are today is in the midst of the employee experience era. And what I mean by that is employees are empowered. Employees, somewhat accelerated by the pandemic. We've seen a shift in the workforce dynamics, hybrid working patterns, remote working. Employees expect a consumer grade experience. And that's largely down to a generational shift in the labor market. And I think we can look to how companies have been successful in the consumer space to be able to relate to that and be effective.
So there you have it. It's all Unily's fault, straight from the leadership team. Only joking. But it does show the growth in the IC tech stack being kind of linked to employee engagement. I want to give our product team actually a chance to respond to that. What do they feel? Have they been building the product around engagement and experience and not so much about internal comms anymore? So this podcast episode is basically about should internal comms be responsible for employee engagement? And one of the arguments around why they are is because the tech's grown. And so what started off as just an internal comms tool is now based around engagement. So do you think it's like the fault of products like Unily that internal comms are responsible for engagement? How has the product grown like that?
I think we've always designed our product around the challenges that internal communicators face predominantly, but I think communications challenges aren't just the responsibility of internal comms. We found that through employee experience platforms, even though internal comms predominantly own the intranet, they have key stakeholders that are responsible for helping them communicate to their business, and that could be people in HR or people in IT. They have key knowledge and information that they need to get out to their workforce. So even though we solve a lot of challenges, internal comms challenges, we do have to support the needs of people across departments, because they're also responsible for communicating and engaging their employees.
So you use the word like engaging there, which is interesting,
Yes.
because I guess we started off, and I remember like when we first worked on the product, it was predominantly about communication, but now the use cases and stuff that we're building for are very engagement based. So whilst the tool was internal comms, it's now grown into engagement, and that's partly because of the comms challenges that are coming up, but also because the tech's grown for the rest of the business, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe that does show that internal comms have grown to also own the engagement space somewhat, because how can you communicate to people that aren't actually engaged in comms?
That's true. It's like we can communicate, but we might be able to reach them, but are they actually engaging? I guess the challenges come together, so it's almost like the tech's growing alongside internal comms. Interesting.
Yeah, but I think for internal comms to be successful in communications, they need an engaged workforce, but they also need to work with people across the organisation, and that's why we see, when we're, our customers, their intranets aren't just solely owned by internal comms. They have site owners, content creators, that have various different roles across the business.
Yeah, perfect. That gives me the product insight that I needed. So thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Where does that leave us? Do I personally think internal comms should be responsible and reporting on employee engagement? I think the main problem is the traditional structures of our organisation not necessarily being shaped around employee engagement. So when leaders and employees alike come looking for people responsible for employee engagement, they're probably looking at internal communicators. They flex to culture. They've grown an intranet product around employee experience. They were instrumental in the communications and culture when it came to COVID. And so a lot of people are pointing at internal communicators, expecting them to report on engagement. But that's not an answer. Do I think internal communicators should be responsible for engagement? Well, I think there's a choice, and I see us at an IC inflection point. There's a choice of two. Number one is be an IC purist. Be clear about being an internal communicator and only own metrics that relate to internal communications. And if people try to push stuff into your court, that is experience and engagement, push it back, because as Advita says, you risk undervaluing the internal comms function. Now, the second choice you have is lean into engagement and experience. I feel like that in the next 2-3 years, there will be point people for experience and engagement in their job title. Sean earlier referenced differences in job titles. I foresee people being heads of employee experience, and I think internal communicators are more than qualified to fulfill that role. So, I leave you with a choice. Are you an IC purist, or are you leaning into the EX and engagement era?